Hey everybody, I'm Greg Sowell, and this is Why Am I, a podcast where I talk to interesting people and try and trace a path to where they find themselves today. So my guest this go around is Gary Goldstein. This fella is a writer of books, TV shows, and movies, and he also writes for the LA Times. But not only has he written for Hallmark movies, which is becoming something of a theme here, I wonder if we can get them all, but he's also written for the likes of Beverly Hills 90210, which is super strange because that featured prominently, I would say, in my youth, in my younger years, in my youths. If you find this walk through his mind interesting, I urge you to check out the newest book he's put out, which is called Please Come to Boston. And if nothing else, I hope you enjoy this chat with Gary. Gary, thank you for joining me on the Why Am I podcast.
Greg, happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you are one of the rare folks, I should say, that actually found me. I'm still not even sure how you found me. I didn't want to ask because I was curious if it would come out.
You want to know?
Yeah. How'd you find me?
I just, as somebody I know, somebody I follow on Twitter, I honestly don't remember who, did an interview with you a while back. Maybe it was maybe earlier in the year, or probably early in the year. And I just thought it was a really interesting interview. And I think I do a lot of interviews for the work that I do to talk about it. And it's always interesting when the approach is not always the head on, we're selling this thing. When you kind of work your way into it, because I think process is so important. And as a writer and we'll call myself a creative person, how you get there I think is interesting sometimes as the product itself. So it's always fun to talk about it. And as a writer, I'm always fascinated by how people end up where they are, because the life takes so many twists and turns that we very rarely can predict. We may think we know what we want to do, but we can very rarely predict, what path our life is going to take. And I think that when you hear people's stories, and as I write and create characters for screenplays or books or whatever, you have to kind of figure out the backstory for your main characters, and how did they get there? What makes somebody the character that they are, as opposed to, oh, this person is just controlling, or this person is just neurotic, or this person is just insecure, or whatever it is. Why is that person there? And it's somewhere along the way we need to know what the reasons are. And I find that kind of interesting. So when I heard the interview, your podcast, I thought it was just different and interesting. And I'm glad you're back doing them now.
Yeah, I am as well. And I'm glad it stuck out enough for you to reach out.
It did.
Yeah, something you said there really sparked something in my brain. And it's the idea that like whether we meet people in real life or it's characters in a novel or a TV show, a lot of times we'll just take their quirks at face value. We don't really think about, how did this person actually get to this place? And so that truly fascinates me about people. You see somebody with this interesting bend or this thing that they really love, and it's never a straight line between this is how it started, this is how I'm here. It's always some crazy circuitous passing. And it's always, I don't know about always, but it's almost more interesting than I could have even imagined to begin with.
Right. Well, sometimes stranger than fiction. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, for sure. Well, usually I ask, the one question I ask everybody, you've already given me a little bit of taste of that, but ultimately I want to know, who are you, Gary?
Oh, is that before or after this great meal I just had? I'm two very different people. Those are always great questions, and I'm sure everybody answers them very differently. On the surface, I am a ex-New Yorker. I've lived in Los Angeles for the better part of my life. I'm a screenwriter. I'm a novelist. I'm a journalist. I've written many stage plays. I've had a very kind of interesting, eclectic career. I'm a husband. I'm a brother. I'm a son. I'm an uncle. All of those kinds of things. And I have really, in this new book that I wrote, it's a book that looks back on two people's lives. It's mostly set in 1975, but it moves forward 50 years in points. And it occurred to me that I could never have written this book X number of years ago, because we need the perspective in our lives to see how people get where they are. You don't have to wait 50 years. It's not, that wasn't the case, but it's still a matter of, again, how people start off in a certain place and get to another place in their life many years later. And I feel like not that I had a master plan in any way, but my life has sort of found its way back to some of the earlier plans. And I took lots of segues until I really got on the track that I am, that I ended up being on for all of these years, as a writer. So I think I'm somebody who, I really learned a lot, sometimes the hard way, sometimes in a challenging way. Sometimes I've been lucky. Sometimes it's been a matter of opportunity or hopefully a little talent, to end up having whatever successes that I've had in my profession and even in my personal life, and I've certainly done a lot of work on myself as a person, to try to become the best person that I can for me, for other people, to draw the right people into your life by being good for yourself, the whole concept of you have to be good for yourself before you can be good for other people, that sort of thing. And, sort of putting away a lot of the childhood issues and a lot of the things I grew up around and problems and the things that kind of shaped me and all of that, and kind of having a better understanding of the past and family history and things like that. So I definitely say I'm somebody who's done a lot of work on myself in terms of understanding, what has made me to answer your question, who are you? The person that I am. And it's also made me, I think, a stronger writer, because understanding human nature, which I've done so much, it really is very helpful in terms of writing characters and writing characters that are really fleshed out and that kind of thing. And invariably, as a writer, people will say, especially when I have a main character who there's an external similarity to me or my life or something. The question always is, are you your main character? And I'd say most writers would say there's always a little part of us somewhere in our main characters, even if you're writing I don't somebody who's completely not like you at all. There's always a little bit, and that's always interesting, and how you, and then it's also how you take other people's traits and other people's histories and things, and turning them into some of your characters, pulling some of the most interesting, intriguing parts, what makes those people the way they are. And in writing characters, especially in writing screenplays, you're dealing with a central relationship generally. It's the two people on the poster, that kind of thing. And those relationships are all about people who change each other and who complement each other. They don't realize it. I mean, complement like E-A-M-E-N-T. They don't realize it at the time, but suddenly where one character is weak, another one is strong, and vice versa. And that's why they're brought together. They're brought together for a reason. And I think that's been very helpful. That sort of writing those kinds of characters and relationships has been really helpful to me in terms of understanding the people around me and the people in my life. So anyway, I think, I don't know if that completely answers the question, but it does give a window into kind of like how I have evolved as a person and how I've sort of emotionally gotten to where I've been. And, also the more you do a certain job and all of that, hopefully the better you get, or just the more you understand your process. And I'm always learning something. I could write another 30 books and 20 screenplays. There's always something to learn, which is always interesting, because I'm kind of, like to be a student and on top of all of it. So, how's that sound?
It sounds great. I'm furiously scribbling notes because I just have questions that come up as you're talking about this stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
You talked about how people ask you, like, are you the main character in your book? And I noticed your first two books had a little bit of similar themes there, right? People in LA, some major life event happens, they find somebody else, and they, shenanigans ensue. It's like whatever, life begins to progress in interesting and unexpected ways. But this third one feels like it's more of a departure from that formula, and it makes me wonder, because you said that sometimes you go back to maybe revisit certain plans that you didn't necessarily expect to ever come back to. And I'm curious, is this one of those situations?
Uh, what you mean in terms of this book, writing this book?
Yeah.
Well, the funny thing is, I've written a lot, and have never really written about college life.
Hmm.
I think I probably said a few things. Like my last book, there was the one of the main characters who dies in the beginning is a college professor. So I have a couple of scenes on the college campus in the very beginning, but I generally haven't delved into what it's like to enter college life. And some of my favorite movies are set in colleges, movies like The Paper Chase and things like that, and in academic environments, which I just kind of find kind of interesting. But what's most interesting to me about those environments is that you're catching people at a very kind of young and impressionable age where people are trying to find themselves and also they think they have certain goals, and they're kind of also often upended the goals as they try to pursue them, because sometimes they're a little too lofty, and you're just not realizing, without a lot of life experience, you're not always aware of or realizing some of the pitfalls that are going to come your way. It's like saying, oh, I'm going to be an astronaut, and then like not realizing, oh, you have to go to, there's a lot that goes into that. So I thought the college environment would be really interesting as a springboard because you want to put characters in a place that they will change, in an environment that they'll change, and put them around people who they will change and who will change them. And I love college. I had a really great 4 years in college, and I remember it very, very vividly.
Mm.
And I just figured, it was kind of a formative period for me. The concept of college is not always necessary for everyone, and particularly as time has gone on, there's certainly debates about, where college really fits into one's future life. But for me anyway, it did provide a really nice bridge from being 18 to 21 or two, and sort of helping you mature emotionally and socially and psychologically and career wise and all that stuff. So I thought would be a very interesting environment to put somebody into. But of course, like most of what I write, when it comes to books, I'm not a big outliner. When it comes to scripts, I am, because you kind of have to. It's such a different kind of puzzle that you really need to know exactly where you're going along the way. But with a book, you have a little bit more flexibility, or at least I feel in the writing you do, even though in the end it may be edited so that it's more traditional or classically told. And I just figure within that, the most interesting things often to me are stories that take place within the most compressed amount of time. I mean, I love movies and stories that take place over the course of one whole day. To me, that's, so much can happen in a day. But in this book, it takes place from the very first day that Nikki, first of all, the book is called Please Come to Boston. I'm not sure what said that. It's the story of this 18-year-old guy named Nicky DeMarco, who comes from Long Island. He grew up in the town next to where I grew up. So there was some kind of, I just pulled that out of my head. And he's entering college for the first time, and it's the first day of college, and he's kind of he's kind of naive, but he's sort of game, and he just wants to fit in, and like everybody, it's such a blur that first day of starting anything, new job and school and home, whatever. And it's the story about how he kind of like what happens to him over the course of this entire first semester at Boston University, and things do not, how he sets out and what he thinks, is in his mind and where he'll be going. He's presented with opportunities that he was never presented with before, and his life takes some very, very unexpected turns, emotionally, sexually, family wise, romantic wise, and it's how he operates, and how he kind of navigates the whole thing, and takes some big swings along the way, but lots of obstacles happen as a result of it. You can't just go out there and do everything you want without some kind of retribution. So we have plenty of obstacles, but the story has a lot of surprises in it, and I think part of that is because I even though I knew the main events along the way as I was writing it, kind of the key moments, and certainly how I wanted it to end. And there's a bit of a dual timeline in it from the mid 1970s, 1975. To about 8 chapters that take place today in the same environment with the same characters. That was something I kind of knew I was going to do from the start, because I wanted that kind of perspective, but wasn't really sure how I was going to execute it. And that was kind of tricky until I pulled that off. But because I don't outline everything, and because I know where I'm going, but I don't always know how I'm getting there, I end up with some nice surprises along the way. And so that was kind of the approach to this particular story. I'm not saying it would work for everything or everything you write, but this story, I think it was, the writing of it was a little bit looser. And I think, I think it shows up in the book itself, just with the surprises and the emotion, a lot of emotional surprises that happen.
Yeah, that's something that I remember kind of caught me off guard the first few times I started talking to authors, because I found this is kind of a universal truth, is that oftentimes you guys are just as surprised at what the characters do or where they end up as us, the readers, are. It's like you don't necessarily know where it's going to go either.
Yeah, your readers do tell you where to go. Your characters, rather, do tell you where to go. I mean, that's kind of a lot of authors will say that. A lot of writers will say that. They develop their own personalities. They become their own voice, and you're just sort of catching up with them and following them. And that's always interesting, because that means that you're probably written a full character, a rich character, a character who's dimensional. So that when I started off writing, I started off writing for like half-hour comedies for TV, for sitcoms. And you have to start that kind of work, and it's relatively the same today. You have to find a TV show that you like, that's popular, that has good voices, and write your own version. You write your own spec script of that show. So what I found was the better shows that I was writing scripts of, where you could duplicate the voices, and the voices were so vivid because the characters were so vivid. Going back to like shows like The Golden Girls, Cheers, and shows like that, where the characters, in fact, you move forward today through the Seinfeld era and Modern Family and things like that, where the characters' voices were just so clear, and they were so, I wouldn't say they were easy to capture, but they were capturable. And if you could find the way to just have the character voice, come through you, you could really write a good spec script of a show. And that's how I and lots of writers ended up getting initial work, because we were able to capture those voices. But that's because the voices were very clear and very well defined to begin with. And that's to me very interesting, and trying to recreate, when I write things, characters that are not interchangeable, voices that are not interchangeable. So if you were reading it out, whose voice it was, or what character it was, and so on.
The subject matter you're talking about, the way you start talking about college life and being new in there, like I can sense the enthusiasm and energy, and kind of the opportunity that people like have in front of them when they're doing that. You know what? It made me think about, because I have high school kids right now, and sometimes I think that, they're like on a different planet now. Like things feel so different, right? But then when I distill it down, I boil it down, it's the same stuff. It's complex relationships. It's dynamics with your friends, with people that you're attracted to. Like you get into fights, you make up, all that same stuff still holds true. Because I was thinking, if you're writing a book about people in college in 1975, will people in 2024 in college, be able to relate to that? And they 100% will. It's the same feeling.
And obviously it's very important, because you want to, have a broad audience. This is not a book that's necessarily for people of a certain age who went to that school in that city back then. And I've had a lot of younger people read the book, and they're like, "God, I just loved all the explanations or the descriptions of college life and all the emotions, because that's exactly what everybody goes through." And that really hasn't changed that much. And that's something that I really was aware of as I was writing it, the whole concept of fitting in and figuring out where your place is in this big maze of people and places, and also being away from your family for the first time. Being out of the nest and really having freedom, and not having to answer to everything, and not having to, being able to, like, if people often are an offshoot of their parents, or what their parents' values were, or what they grew up with. But then when you're finally on your own, you have perspective, and you can really look back on something and say, wait a second, there are other kinds of ways of thinking. There are other kinds of people out there, not just who I grew up with. And, unless if you grow up I grew up in suburban New York, and, it was a very kind of nice middle class place, I guess you call it. But it wasn't especially diverse, in terms of certainly in terms of attitudes and things. And it was at a different time of life when where attitudes were not quite as diverse and open as they are now. And so I left, going to college uh, with my preconceived notions of things, and many of them were upended by the world at large. And you find out there just so much opportunity and excitement and choices, not choices as much as just opportunities. And it's what you do and whether you seize them or not. Now, Nikki, my main character in this book, he seizes his opportunities even much more than I would have back then. So I'm really proud of what he's done, what he does, and despite all the fear and trepidation and everything, all the swings he takes, I think are really, I love that he does that. That I was not as I was not necessarily faced with some of the choices and opportunities that he was, but I was probably not as intrepid as he turned out to be. He didn't know he was, but he turned out to have a lot more gumption than he thought. And that's also what happens. We find that sometimes we're stronger and more confident than we thought we were.
Yeah. Something you said there ticks on how when I was young, so I went to a technical college, so it was just 2 years, got in, got out. So I feel like I missed a lot of the college experience that a lot of people sort of talk about. But I was also a very shy person and very introverted. I didn't like crowds. This conversation right now would have never happened back then, just because I was such
you don't seem introverted, but
I was such a different person back then. And so it makes me wonder, like, because when I look back, sometimes I think if I was the same person I am now, I would have done all of these things. I would have taken all these opportunities. I just would have done more stuff and been less afraid of my shadow and the world around me and stuff. Do you feel like that's kind of the same too? You can look back and think, like, I don't know, I'm far less risk averse now. Like, I feel like nothing can harm me and I can just go and talk to people and interact with the world and I'll be okay. But back then, I just didn't have that feeling. Do you feel like you're more free when you look back through that lens than you were then?
definitely. I mean, more confident, freer, having just been through so much more, emotionally and work wise and home wise and family wise, all the things that we all go through. I definitely came out a much stronger, more kind of connected person than I was as a kid, or certainly being in college. I look back on it like we all do and say, oh, I wish I did that. I wish I did that. I wish I didn't do that. I wish I was stronger here. I wish I did reach out more there. But when you're a kid and you're growing up, and if really, even as a young adult, I really believe we all do the best we can with the circumstances and what we know and the environments we're in, and all of that. And I was always that kid in class who would sort of make the joke, or have the kind of funny comment or something like that, which often got me in trouble. But I wasn't necessarily the most confident kid, but I had a certain confidence, and maybe, I don't know what you call, maybe intellectual confidence or something. I don't know what you would say, but there were parts of me that were confident, but other parts that were so not confident. So, ultimately it was about joining those two things together for me as my life went on, and becoming an emotionally confident person, an intellectually confident person, a psychologically confident, like finding your versions of confidence. And, I'm tripped up, like we all are to this day, with the past and things that have happened, old habits and things like that. But generally speaking, I'm happy with the way it's turned out. But it took a lot of work, and I think people who do, like I said earlier in the interview, when you do work on yourself, and it's never too late to go to therapy, my friends. I think it's really important, because again, as we get older, we have to be better for the people around us, and if you want people in your life, and whether it's your spouses, siblings, or children, or whatever, it's not just about us. It's about what we put out into the world, and what we want other people to feel from us at that given moment, and how much we can give back to that person. As a writer, excuse me, I've been through, I've learned so much over the years in terms of selling things and being out in the screenplay and movie and TV world, and dealing with buyers and dealing with executives and producers and actors and whoever you come in contact with. And I learned a lot. And like I said earlier, I learned some things the hard way, and I do my share of mentoring now, and I'm always happy to help people when they have questions along the way about what should I do in writing, because I feel like I've learned so much. If I can pay it, to use an expression that's a little overused at this point, to pay it forward a bit, but it's also like the difficulties that I encountered, that I figured out or was just through process, ended up getting past and surmounting and maybe succeeding at. If I can help somebody not get as tripped up as I may have been, it makes all the things that I went through even more worth it, because you feel like it's not just about you and your success, it's like how you can help other people. And I so appreciate it along the way and to this day when somebody helps me. And I still reach out for help all the time, whether it's asking a writer friend to read something of mine, or trying to get my material out there or promote something or whatever. I'm so grateful for for people's help, because you can't be in the work that I do. It's a very solitary work much of the time, but you can't be an island in terms of of what happens after the fact. For example, writing this book and writing the books that I have, they're very solitary experiences. They take a long time, but then they're over. And then there's a whole other part of the journey, which is the promotion of them, which is, well, actually it starts with the editing of them and the reworking of them and getting your publisher's notes and editor's notes and things like that. And then, the continuing steps of moving them forward, and then the marketing of them and the supporting of them, because, in a book, it's really the author who's there to promote a book. It's not like you have actors or directors or anybody, it's kind of up to us. So it becomes another phase that you have to be prepared for. And not everybody, a lot of times I'm like, I just want to be writing, but then I also enjoy the second part of it, or the third part of it, because, you can take so much of, again, what you learned and share it, and hopefully inspire other people to not necessarily follow what you've done, but follow their bliss, or follow the thing that they want to do. People who want to write, this is a very hard time to be a screenwriter, I think, just because of just a lot of factors. The business has changed so much over time, and there's been so much vertical integration and consolidation, and all of that's not the easiest time for somebody to sort of break into being a TV writer or a screenwriter. But I would never discourage anybody from doing it. I think if you want to write, you have to write, and you have to maybe have your day job, not quit your day job, and say, I'm going to burst onto the scene with this one script. It's never like that. And some people are just lucky, but most people aren't. And it takes a lot of hammering away to get this stuff going and all that. But I would never discourage anybody from following their passion. And I think that's another thing. I think in life, I had a whole other career before I was a screenwriter. I was a marketing executive. I worked in movie publicity, and it was a whole other world, and I enjoyed it. And I moved forward in the world and all of that. I guess I had some capacity for it, but ultimately I wasn't happy doing it, and I realized I wanted to go back to my first love, which was writing, and I did, and I just sort of left the whole thing behind. And actually, the story goes, they asked me to sign this very long-term contract with the company, and I was like, I don't think I can do that, and they didn't understand. And I was like, I don't know. I was just looking at this piece of paper, and I was like, I don't think I can do that. And I was young enough to make a switch. And I had a little money saved up from having these jobs, and I just dove into the shallow end of the pool, I guess you'd say, or the deep end. I don't know what the metaphor is, but and it was. But it was not easy. It was way less easy than I thought it was going to be. But you find your way. Eventually, you learn how to swim. And you find your way, and I'm glad I did it. But that was following what I felt was my bliss. I was kind of naive about some of it, and I was kind of moved in some probably not quite correct directions by the people who were trying to be helpful. But eventually, you find your place, and you figure out where you fit in, and all of that. But I would always encourage people to live your authentic life. And that's kind of actually a lot of the theme of Please Come to Boston, the book about about having the strength and the confidence and the kind of the fortitude basically to live an authentic life if you are able to. And not everybody's able to. It's not always easy. Your authentic life, whether it's emotional or a career situation or relationships, or whatever, it's not easy for everybody. And some, based upon where you grew up, based upon your background, based upon the opportunities that lay out in front of you, it's not always that easy. So when it comes to living an authentic life or making life choices or seizing opportunities, it's very easy for me to say on the outside, go for it. I mean, I'm a cheerleader kind of person. It's like, I always want people to succeed, and I love seeing people, especially people that I know and care about, succeeding, with their passions and their projects and all of that. But not everybody has the opportunity to do it. But also, life goes very fast, and I think you have to keep in mind your goals and try to find ways of achieving them to whatever level you can. Unfortunately, reality sets in, and people have to make a living. You have to feed your family. You have to pay the rent, all of that. So, we don't always have a lot of the choices. We can't just, kick back on a desert island and, write a novel for 8 months. I mean, that's just not the real world. And I understand that. But I think, if I've learned anything, it's don't let your passions go unexplored, because it's really only up to you to be able to make them happen. And even if they don't happen in the way you want them to or think they will, at least you've tried something and you've made an effort. And you can do it at any point in life, depending upon what that passion may be. So that's definitely one of my life lessons.
That's interesting. Don't let
happy to share it if it helps anybody.
Go unexplored. I like that a lot. I was perusing your Instagram earlier, and I noticed, unlike a lot of authors,
somebody's looking at it.
Yeah. Well, I noticed, unlike a lot of authors, there was some self-promotion. As you talked about, like, part of the novel is it doesn't just stop when the book comes out. There's a whole lot more that you basically just have to. Yeah, it's a child, and you have to raise this thing, right? You have to rear it and get it out in the world. But that was only a small fraction of what was on there. A lot of it was you lifting up other writers and like your friends. Obviously, your friends. You're out there promoting their stuff and helping them out. And I was thinking that speaks to something, and I wasn't 100% sure what it was. And then now I hear you talking about how you like to mentor and nurture and grow. And I could see that. I could see that rah cheerleader. Let's lift everyone up along the way. Yeah. So it makes me wonder, where did that come from? Has that always been part of you, or is that something that just sort of evolved over time?
Well, first, thank you for saying that. And author, especially when it comes to books, you depend upon other authors, to help you, and you want to then help certain other authors. And at the same time, I would say I'm somebody that's always been like there for the underdog. Not that I've felt like an underdog particularly, but I'm always sort of there for the person who's maybe having a harder time or whatever, because I know I've had so many hard times in terms of making things happen. Yeah. Right. So that, to me, it's very important. It's funny, an Instagram profile. Maybe I have, I don't know, 1,000 posts or something like that since I've been doing Instagram. And the key is my idea about Instagram is you should be able to look at an Instagram and really understand a person through the Instagram. It's not just posting pictures of flowers, or it's all the different things that make up who you are. And then if you actually go beyond the photo and you actually read what people write, you really learn so much. That's, I think, one of the great things about social media. And I know that there's a lot of upsides and downsides to social media, but one of the upsides to me has always been to be able to learn about other people, whether they're people in my life or strangers, the things I didn't know that we don't communicate on a day-to-day basis, that when you are aware of somebody's social media feed, you will, it's not, again, it's not just posting the flower pictures or your dessert pictures. It's posting life pictures and things that interest you that you hope will interest other people. Because, you don't, I mean, I try not to post things that I think nobody will be interested in. It's like if I watched a great TV series, I want to put that out there. I want that series to be successful. I want the people on the series to be successful. I want people to enjoy it. And I think that's really important. So your Instagram feed, is that, should be that kind of snapshot of your life. But for me, I've always tried to help because like I said earlier, I really appreciate so much what people have helped me, and not everybody has, and I certainly haven't helped every single person who's come my way. You can't do it. But because of, it's not like they say you have to have, like, you'll understand this from the beginning of our conversation, you have to have been a server in a restaurant, a wait staffer, to understand, like, that you should tip well, for example, when you're eating, and if you haven't been in that position, you may not realize, like, really how important a good tip is if the service is good and the food is good and all of that. And I kind of feel the same way, like if in talking about this, if you haven't been through some of these experiences, it's kind of hard to kind of project how you should treat other people in this particular business of writing, until you're in it and you kind of realize, again, how much it's not just about the writing. It's about interpersonal relationships. It's about who do you want to work with. It's about treating people well. It's about listening to other people's thoughts and notes and input, and having being secure enough to filter all the information that comes down the pike in terms of your work, and not taking things too personally, and all of that, that you learn along the way. So again, it comes back to, again, I've learned a lot of things the hard way, whether it's work or just life in general. And my life has not been extraordinarily hard, per se, compared to so many other people. I'm very grateful for it. But, we all learn, relatively speaking, we all learn our lessons, about life lessons. And again, how to be better people, how to be better for other people, how to be good to ourselves, how to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish and not make yourself crazy in the process, which is one of the big things, yeah, but I think I was always, as a kid, I grew up in a household where, there was a lot of arguing and things. So, I was always the person to try to be the peacekeeper,
Mm-hmm.
or when anybody would get mad at a family member, I would try to, defend them, even if I didn't know what I was talking about. So that was kind of the person that I was. I've been, I might have made a good legal arbitrator or something like that, because I try to see both sides and all of that. I'm not a saint about it, but there are two sides to every story, and sometimes you do need a little bit of objectivity to help other people.
Yeah, I played that peacekeeper role as a kid too, and I found a lot of that kind of translates into people pleasing and other things like that, wanting everybody to be happy, sometimes at your expense. And I like to call myself a recovering people pleaser, so I try not to exhibit too many of those behaviors anymore. But I
think that's a really good really good way to put it.
Have some of those tendencies.
Yeah,
for sure.
Well, part of that concept of people pleasing is, are we doing it to help other people, or are we doing it to make people like us? Are we doing it to kind of justify some action we take that we may not be that sure about? Does it come out of insecurity? Does it come out of genuine care for somebody? I don't know. I guess it depends upon the situation. But look, you can't go wrong by trying to help somebody. I mean, really, if they want help. I think that's, to whatever level that help is, I think, you can just start there and say, whatever the reason you're doing it, it's a good thing to do.
Yeah. Something you mentioned touched on something that I've recently, well, I'd say recently, probably in the last couple of years, really come to understand. And that is, it's hard to have sympathy or empathy for somebody if you've never experienced that thing they're experiencing, right? So there's a lot of folks out there that definitely need help, right? They need somebody to give a little energy, a little time, a little attention. I mean, whatever it happens to be. But it's hard sometimes for us to put ourselves in those other people's shoes. And there was a counselor I was talking to. She works with a lot of trauma patients, and she was saying of like her patients and other things. She said, if there's not a person that you wouldn't love if you could read their story. And I found that to be absolutely fascinating, because I've found that to be true myself, that once you really learn about how somebody is made and created and some of the things they go through, you can really start to understand. And I was thinking, a lot of things have helped me put myself in those shoes from the perspective of writers, right? That they can give me insights into people, even if it's fictitious. They're generally pulling on things that are real to them or that they've seen in their life. And so it helps me get there. Another really big one is podcasts, because I hear it from their mouths, right? I hear how they came up, how the environments that molded them and shaped them. And it's changed me a lot. Have you ever thought about how like some of the stuff you're putting on the page is actually giving people that bit of insight, or is that a thing that happens for you, or am I just some kind of a weirdo?
No, I think it goes both ways. And I know that when I read a book, let's say, or watch a movie, what makes you cry, what makes you laugh, what makes you say, that's it, that's true, I like that. That reminds me of me. That reminds me of this person. That is, those are what makes great stories. It's not always so much about plot and what drives immerses us in a story. It's about the characters, and it's about who these characters are, good, bad, or indifferent, and how do we relate to them. You can, especially in books, because you're given more of the chance, and a lot of books are more of a slow burn and to build up to things. You start off sometimes not liking a character, and then as the time goes on, you really love the character because you have been taken on this journey. And little by little, we relate to a lot of all those emotional things, or some of the life things, that big life things that happen to people. And again, it goes back to understanding who that character is, why they're operating a certain way, and all of that. I think I do think it's relatability. They talk about, well, you need to make your characters likable. Well, it's not. That's kind of a very generic way of looking at it. I mean, it's really about making your characters relatable. Mm-hmm. And even when you've seen movies with the anti-heroes, they're not necessarily great people, but you understand why they're doing. You hopefully understand why they're doing what they're doing, and you relate to that idea of, whatever it is, getting back at somebody, or saving the world, or whatever, So I think all that's really important, but it's the relatability of situations and characters that I think make the most successful stories. My last book, The Mother I Never Had, was a little more dramatic book than Please Come to Boston. And it was about a family, somebody dies in the family, and the son who's left discovers a lot of things about his father that now that he's gone, that he is sort of left with. And it's how his life completely turns upside down when this secret comes out. And even though it was kind of a specific story to this particular family, people would read it and they would say, even though I didn't have this experience with my parent, or with my sibling or whatever, my family had this version of it. And everybody started bringing their own history to the story that I created, because it was just relatable enough in a bigger picture for people to respond. And if you find your way into a story, everything doesn't have to be about us. It's like, as a writer, you can't be writing about yourself and, your life all the time. It's really about, you pull from your life, but then you have to try to fictionalize it and make it something that people can really relate to on a broader scale. And that comes back to the emotional quotient, which is really ultimately what draws people in.
Yeah. And that kind of makes me think about how I've heard people tell me before, like the moment they realized their parent was a real person, just like them. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, yeah. There's I think for a lot of people, and I'm not saying necessarily the case in the novel there, but there's a lot of people where there's some kind of watershed moment where something happens and they realize, oh, my parent is a human too. And it can be pretty jarring. I mean, because I think your brain wants to keep one narrative, and to like have to rewrite that is like very, very tough. And I always find those stories very interesting.
Yeah, well, it's like walking in on your parents having sex.
Well, that's 100%. Yes, of course. Yeah. That is, I think, the moment for a lot of people.
Yeah,
undoubtedly.
that in one word version or another is pretty much it, I think. But yeah, no, it's true. I think as we get older, we want our parents to be real people, but as children, we want our parents to protect us and, support us and not give us a hard time and, and just be perfect, but they're not and we're not. And, we learn so much along the way. But yeah, I think that so often we don't really know a lot about somebody until they're gone, and that's always sad. And I try as I get older, I try to make sure that if I'm curious about something of my family history or friends' history or something, to ask that question and be clear about it, because little by little there are fewer and fewer people to ask sometimes
Yeah.
about somebody's existence and all of that, as the generations disappear. So I think that is very, very important to ask those questions along the way, and that's why I think things like Ancestry and 23andMe, that's what it's called, have become so popular because people want to learn about their past, and they often don't learn anything. I know growing up, there was so many things in my family we never talked about. I mean, big things that happened in family history that never came up, and as I got older, I had to ask some of the questions. And a lot of the times, my parents or somebody would go, I don't really remember, ask Aunt so-and-so or whatever, and again, that's sort of part of sort of a generational thing too. But yeah, I think it's important to ask those questions because again, those people are not going to be around forever that you can ask the questions of.
100%. And to be honest, I love people telling me a story. This is probably one of the big reasons why I do this. I just love people
Yeah,
telling me
I'm sure.
stories. But I have an uncle that is on my dad's side, and I don't really know much about that part of the family. And so I actually devised a situation in which I would walk around with him. I actually recorded a podcast where we're walking. One of his hobbies is picking up pecans out in the parks, and so we walked around, and he just told me stories about my family, and I about 90% of the things he told me, I had no idea about. It was really interesting and eye-opening. And also, just the idea of getting to ask questions of, what do you think about this or that, from somebody from a completely different walk of life, completely different place, and how they approach the world, what's important to them. Like, that stuff helps me grow as a person. But also, I learned a lot about my family, and I didn't expect to really I didn't know what to expect to get from that, but I found it really interesting. It made me look at people in a different way, in a good way, for sure.
Yeah. Well, listen, I think the reason podcasts have become so successful is because you really can do a deep dive into somebody's life or into somebody's experience, and you can listen to. I mean, you can look when there's an magazine, a newspaper article about somebody, you can certainly read it, but in reality, listening to voices can really penetrate so well, and especially in a podcast like this, where you really can take some deep dives and really look into things and really talk about stuff. They're not just quick hits. If people are listening to an entire interview, I mean, it really, when you're done listening, you really feel like you've met somebody, you've experienced something. I don't know if you ever listened to Mark Maron's podcast, the WTF podcast.
Absolutely.
But I think they're just excellent because, he takes an actor or whoever, musician, whoever it is, from day one to day, and when it's done, I just feel like I've been on this incredible journey. It's so captivating. And I think that's, again, really one of the reasons that podcasts have taken off so much.
Yeah, he's very disarming. Like I feel like he gets people to say things that they typically wouldn't, which is infinitely fascinating to me. But
Yes, absolutely.
something you said a second ago is absolutely true, because it's one of my core memories of, we don't know that much about somebody until they're gone. I had an Uncle Lee, and I really didn't know much about him, but he had this massive heart attack and died. And then at the wake the day before, all these people, most of which I didn't even know, started sharing all of the craziest stories I've probably ever heard in my life about this guy. And it's like, man, I wish I knew that guy. I wish I knew the guy that they were talking, right? So it's strange. And that's one of the things that really also made me want to kind of document sort of the stories of somebody's life, but not necessarily just from the perspective of somebody else. I wanted it in their voice. I wanted it in a way that it would live on forever.
Right. Well, you got to get people while they're still here. It's really
100%. 100%. Don't waste time. Yeah,
exactly.
I dig it. Well, I'll tell you what, you have been extremely generous with your time. Gary,
My
it was an
pleasure.
absolute pleasure to meet you. You seem like a man of your word. You said you like to help people, mentor. You also give me the sense that you're the kind of person that somebody could ask you just about any question and you would feel free to answer it. Is that correct?
At this point in my life, yes, absolutely. I'd say I'm an open book, but yeah, not to, to coin a phrase, but yeah, I look, again, once you start talking to people about yourself and your own deeper emotions and experiences, it gives people permission to tell you. And how many friends do you have that you've known your whole life that you can say, I don't really know enough about them. Just no matter how much we talk, I don't really know what they think about A, B, and C. And the more you can be open, often that opens up the floodgates for somebody else and gives them the permission to do it. And just, you feel like saying, it's okay. Nobody's going to judge you.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah.
We all make mistakes. We're all flawed, and we can always all do better. But there's also a lot of good there, and I want to hear it from other people, and I want to again talk to other people and help if I can. If there's something I can share.
I've definitely found that part of human nature is we reciprocate in kind. So if you're willing to share something of yourself with somebody, they sometimes almost feel obligated to give it back, right? Like to share
Yeah.
back. So I know that can feel scary to a lot of people. Sometimes it's polarizing to folks, but you know what? Like you said, like there's not many things I'm afraid of these days, and why waste time? So definitely.
Right. Exactly.
I love your techniques. I love your method. I appreciate your time. Is there right here at the end, I like to say, is there anything specific? I think there are some very specific things that if you wanted people to find you or go take a look at, we have this book launching. I'm sure that's what we're going to talk about. But promote yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Well, we didn't talk about this, but I've written many TV movies, many for the Hallmark Channel. I think your viewers may have seen some of them. I've been writing for them for a long time. Written many Christmas movies and some fan favorites along the way. So you can always look for those. You can find my all the things that I've written. Go to imdb.com, International Movie Database, and I'm listed there. I have a personal website, GaryGoldsteinLA.com, which has maybe more than you'll ever really need to know about me, but there's a lot of stuff on there. And I'm on social media, on Instagram and Twitter. Please follow me. I'll follow you back at Gary Goldstein LA. And I'm going to give my shameless plug. I've got this right here. My book, Please Come to Boston, comes out, well, by the time it comes out September 10th, but that's probably before this podcast will be out. But you can find it at bookstores, wherever people buy books. And I think it's a book that people really enjoy. I hope you do. And I'd love to hear from you after you read it. Yeah, that's it. Summer went really fast. It was a great summer. Got a lot done, and looking forward to a great fall. And I just really appreciate the opportunity to chat and share whatever it is I know, and talk to you, Greg. You're a really great interviewer.
I appreciate it. Very kind of you, and you are a kind soul. Let me hit stop on all this stuff really quick.